I was mopping the corridor outside Suite 7 when the crying started again. Not started, resumed. It had been going since roughly 100 hours, station time, and it was now past a 200. 5 hours of it, rolling down the service corridor in waves, pausing long enough to make you think it was done, then rising again louder than before. The heir to the Halveth sovereignty, third son of Emperor Solvath the Patient, 8 months old by whatever calendar his people used, did not want to sleep, and every caregiver the imperial retinue had brought aboard could not make him. I knew this because the nannies kept coming out into the corridor. The first one came out around 2:30, sat against the wall with her eyes closed, and went back in 15 minutes later. She came out again at 2300 and did not go back. The second lasted until midnight, the third until 0100. The fourth I didn't see leave. She must have slipped past while I was running the extractor on the lower deck. But she was gone by the time I came back up, and a fifth had taken her place. A tall woman with pale silver markings along her jaw who looked like she had been dragged out of sleep. The fifth lasted 40 minutes. The sixth came out of the suite at 0145, leaned against the wall opposite me, and put her face in her hands. Kept mopping. That's what you do. You keep mopping. The corridor doesn't clean itself because there's an imperial crisis happening 6 meters away. The sixth nanny lifted her face eventually and looked at me the way people look at furniture. She wasn't being unkind. She simply did not register me as a category of person who might have anything to offer. I was the woman with the mop, the same as the cart on wheels beside me, the same as the cleaning solution in its gray canister. I had been working this station for 11 years. I knew the look well. In some ways it made things easier. You could go anywhere, hear anything, see anything, and nobody worried about it, because you were not the kind of person things happened to. She went back inside at 0152. I heard her voice, low and measured, doing the thing trained caregivers do, a practiced tone, a specific rhythm. I did not hear the heir slow down. If anything, he got louder. I am not a caregiver. I want to be clear about that. My qualifications run to institutional sanitation, basic maintenance, 32 years of standing in front of a classroom before my knees decided that was no longer an option. I taught second-year pupils, not infants. I had no training in alien child development, no knowledge of Halveth sleep practices, no credential of any kind that would give a reasonable person confidence in my presence in that room. I had been listening to that child cry for 5 hours, and I recognized the sound. It wasn't pain. It wasn't fear, exactly. I had heard both of those in my years in a classroom. The shriek of a child who has hurt themselves, tight hiccuping cry of one who is frightened. This was neither. This was the sound a child makes when they are overwhelmed by stimulation and cannot find the edge of themselves. Too much light, too much noise, too many hands reaching, too many voices offering too many calibrated sounds. The caregivers were doing everything right, which was exactly the problem. The sixth nanny came back out at 0204. She leaned against the wall, and this time she didn't put her face in her hands. She just stood there with her eyes closed and her arms loose at her sides. Person who has run out of ideas and knows it. I set my mop in the bucket. May I said. She opened her eyes. She looked at me. I'm sorry, she said. Her consolidated was good, formal, the kind you learned from recordings. May I try, I said. I used to be a teacher, not of infants. I've heard that sound before. She looked at me for a long moment. The crying rolled down the corridor, and I watched her face do something complicated. The calculation of a professional who has exhausted her options, meeting the offer of help from a source that does not, by any reasonable measure, qualify. The pride of training versus the plain fact of failure. She stepped aside from the door. I left the mop. I went in. The suite was the finest on the station, which I knew because I cleaned it every third day. Blue-veined marble they'd had shipped up from the surface. Curtains that cost more than my annual pay. The heir's sleeping area was a separate alcove, and whoever had set it up had done so with the best of intentions. Soft lights, appropriate temperature, textured surfaces that Halveth infants were supposed to find calming. Everything correct. Everything wrong. The child was in the center of the sleeping pad, on his back, fists clenched, face crumpled, pushing himself toward something past crying and into exhaustion. He was small, They are always smaller than you expect, infants, even alien ones. He had the high pale forehead of his father and his father's people, and his eyes, when they caught the light, a very dark violet that was almost black. He was not looking at anything. He was looking past everything, the way overwhelmed children do, fixed on some internal weather only he could feel. I sat down on the floor, not on a chair, not on the edge of the sleeping pad, on the floor, cross-legged, at a distance of about a meter, and I did not reach for him, and I did not make a soothing sound, and I did not do anything calibrated. I sat there. I am a large woman, or I was before my knees got bad, and I am aware that I can seem like a lot of space to fill. I tried to take up less. I settled my weight and let my hands rest in my lap, and I breathed slowly, the way you breathe when you want a frightened animal to know you are not interested in it. The crying did not stop, but it changed. The pitch shifted slightly. The way it does when a child's attention has caught on something new without knowing it yet. I had my work apron in my lap, which I'd pulled off when I sat down. I turned the apron over in my hands a couple of times. It is not an interesting object. Canvas, worn pale at the pockets, a little stiff from repeated washing. But it is a thing to look at, and it moves, and it makes a soft sound. The Heir watched it, still crying. But watching, I reached behind me. Where I had set the mop handle, I'd carried it in with me, I don't know why, out of habit, the way you carry your tools, and I laid it across my knees. It is a plain wooden composite handle, the kind we use throughout the station, and it makes a good solid sound when it settles. The Heir's eyes moved to it. I picked it up. I offered it toward him, not pushing, placing it in his hands. Just holding it out, the way you offer a branch to a bird, and wait. He unclenched one fist. I held still. He reached, small fingers spreading, and grabbed the end of the handle. It was too big for him to grip properly, but he grabbed it the way infants grab things, his whole hand and all his concentration, and the crying stuttered, stopped, stuttered again. The fist on the handle tightened. Then I hummed. Not a lullaby his people would know. Nothing calibrated, nothing researched. The song my grandmother used to sing when I was small, tune so old I don't know if it has a name, with a rhythm like a slow tide going in and going out. She sang it in a language neither of us spoke anymore. I don't know the words, I only know the shape of the sound. I hummed it softly, looking at the far wall, not at the child. The Heir's crying slowed, stopped. His grip on the handle went from tight to loose. His breathing changed. That deep, dragging unevenness that is what breathing sounds like when a child falling asleep against their will. When sleep is coming in, whether they want it or not, pulling them under by the ankles. His eyes went from dark violet, focused, to dark violet soft. His fist relaxed. He was asleep in 4 minutes. I sat there another 10, to be certain, and then I carefully disengaged the handle, acquired the slow patience of a person diffusing something delicate. He stirred once, made a sound, and I hummed 3 bars. He settled. I stood up. My knees were not happy, but they rarely are. I picked up the apron, picked up the handle, and turned toward the door. The Emperor was standing in the doorway. I had not heard him come in. I do not know how long he had been there. He was taller than I expected. I had seen him at public functions, but always at a distance, and he was not wearing his formal court dress. He was wearing what looked like a sleep robe in dark gray, plain, and he looked like a man who had been awake for many hours and had stopped trying to look otherwise. His face, which in portraits always carries the composed architecture of authority, was simply tired. He was looking at his son. I waited. In my experience, emperors speak when they're ready and not before, and the worst thing you can do in a difficult situation is fill silence with noise. He said quietly, in consolidated how, not a question. The word came out like a stone falling. He was overwhelmed, I said. Too much attention. The more you give a child in that state, the worse it gets. You have to give them something simple and then leave them room. He looked at me. You are the sanitation worker, he said. Yes, sir. You have done this before. 32 years of second-year pupils, I said. Different species, but children are children. He said nothing for a moment. He looked back at his son, at the small rise and fall of the child's chest, at the relaxed fists, particular stillness that is the only true stillness a body knows. He has not slept, the Emperor said, in 36 hours. I know, he said. I could hear him. Something moved in the Emperor's face. We had 6 caregivers. I know that too, I said. And then, because I was tired, and it was past 0200, and his son was finally sleeping, I said what I thought. They were all trying too hard. That is not a criticism. It is simply what trained caregivers do. They have tools, and they use them. And when one tool fails, they reach for another, and the child can feel the reaching. He needed someone who wasn't trying anything. The emperor considered this. You were not trying anything. I was trying to sit still, I said, which is not the same thing. He looked at me for a long time. It was the look of a man recalculating something. Not in a way that felt threatening. In the way you recalculate, when a fact you were certain about turns out to be wrong, and you have to rebuild the structure around the new fact. Go and rest, he said at last. I went. The chamberlain found me at 0730 on the upper deck running a floor polisher over the grand reception hall. A very tall man, impeccably dressed, with the formal bearing of someone whose entire professional identity is wrapped in composure. He stood at the edge of the polisher's path and waited for me to complete the pass before he spoke. His Imperial Majesty requests your presence, he said. I finished the pass. I turned the polisher off. The Emperor received me in the smaller of the two meeting rooms. I knew better, as the room with the tricky drain in the washroom adjacent. He was in formal dress now, rested-looking, composed. Two officials stood near the far wall. The chamberlain positioned himself to one side. I wish to thank you, the Emperor said. It was nothing, I said. Any teacher would have done it. 6 caregivers, he said, who are not teachers and who were doing everything correct, could not do it. You did it. I do not think it was nothing. I had no good answer to that, so I said nothing. My son will require care for the remainder of our stay, the Emperor said. 11 days. I would like to offer you a formal appointment as his supplementary caregiver for that period. Appropriate compensation. I'm a janitor, I said. I'm not trained for that. You are, the Emperor said, with a precision that was, I thought, the most imperial thing about him, the only person on this station who has successfully done it. I stood there for a moment. I thought about the 11th year pupils' faces, and my knees, and the floor polisher warming itself back down in the reception hall. I'll need to keep my cleaning route, I said. The station doesn't run itself. The Emperor's composure did something small at the edges. It might have been a smile. That can be accommodated, he said. I took the appointment. Every morning I ran my route, and every afternoon I spent 2 hours with the Heir, on the floor of the alcove, with my apron and my mop handle and my grandmother's song. He never cried through any of those 2 hours. On the day the imperial delegation left, the chamberlain appeared at my side in the docking corridor, formally, and presented me with a small sealed case and a document with the Emperor's seal. His Imperial Majesty extends his personal gratitude, the chamberlain said, and states that should you ever require anything, within the reach of the Halveth sovereignty, you have only to ask. Took the case. I took the document. Tell him the floor drain in the meeting room, washroom, is still running slow, I said. Someone should look at it before his next visit. The chamberlain looked at me. He looked at the case. He looked back at me. I will relay the message, he said. I went and got my mop.